Okay, and hello to all my new friends and my old friends and local people and people all over the world and all of the artists on the call. So let's get started. My name is Joyce Raimondo. I'm here in my house in East Hampton, and I'm hosting this program on behalf of the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center, a national landmark in East Hampton. And I'm the education coordinator there. We were going to have a hybrid at the museum tonight, virtual and in person, but because we only had two people who signed up, we decided to only do it on Zoom. So for the people who accidentally showed up, perhaps they didn't read the email, and I apologize for that on behalf of the Pollock House. So today we're going to talk about financial fitness for artists. This is part one. And then in April, we're going to have part two, where we have Renee Vara and Carol Steinberg, an intellectual property lawyer and an art consulting, sharing their expertise. But tonight, we're going to talk more about attitudes, about money and art. And also, I would like to highlight some of the iconic modern artists and how they made money and they prospered from their art. So my goal in this is to debunk the myth of the starving artist. It's a negative stereotype. And frankly, in most cases, it's just not true. Then I'll share some of my art and how I've made money. And then we're going to brainstorm, and you're going to have time to think about what some of your own goals are. Okay? So I hope it's hands-on in terms of that it's actually helpful to you in a practical way. I am a firm believer that as you think, you become. So if you think you're going to be a starving artist, if you think you're not going to make money from art, that will most likely be the case. But if you think I will make money from my art and my creative endeavors, and if you clarify your vision, and also if you really have a very strong desire, I found like the universe sometimes provides in miraculous ways to get us to our vision. So let's start off with Vincent van Gogh, who, you know, the story that he sold one painting in his lifetime. And the truth is that Vincent van Gogh, um, his brother Theo, who was an art dealer, supported Vincent van Gogh. So in that sense, you could say he almost had a patron. And in some cases, it's okay if a family member or another person supports an artist while the artist can do their work. Okay, that's great if you're in that position. Van Gogh says, in my view, I am often rich, not in money, but rich because I have found my métier, something I can devote myself to heart and soul, and that gives inspiration and meaning to my life. So Van Gogh was very devout. He was a very spiritual person. And he he expressed his spirituality through his art throughout his life. And of course, today he's one of the best, well-known, highest selling artists in the world. Sometimes the money might come after you die, but we don't want to focus on that today. Okay, so Mary Cassatt and Renoir often do commissions and portraits, as is the case with these two paintings. And Renoir says, to my mind, a picture should be something pleasant, cheerful, and pretty. Yes, pretty. There are too many unpleasant things in life, as it is without creating still more of them. So whatever your subject is as an artist is great. But if you choose to paint beauty and happiness, that's okay. I was once at a talk, and this young woman was sitting there, and she went to a prestigious art school, and she said, I really just want to paint flowers, but I feel like it's not sophisticated. And, you know, I said, look at the world's great artists. You can paint whatever you want to paint. But the idea is if you are a portrait artist, you can paint, you can get commissions. So Willem Merritt Chase and the other East End Impressionists come out to Long Island in the late 1800s to do plein air painting at a time when Long Island on the East End was not known fully as a tourist destination. And coming out here, these artists help establish the East End of Long Island as a place where city dwellers could go to be spiritually renewed and uplifted. And it was even a moral idea that being in nature makes you a better person. You get away from the city and you relax your mind, and you take in beauty, it elevates your mind. And interestingly, William Merritt Chase was hired to actually make paintings to promote this area. And he was hired by the Long Island Railroad along with Winslow Homer and other artists. So William Merritt Chase is a very good example. He had a Shinnecock Hill Summer School of Art where he taught plein air painting, that's painting outdoors, and then eventually founded the Chase School of Art, which was later known as the Parsons School of Design. So many of us artists here, we teach, whether it's on the college level, whether it's as a school teacher. But I think being an artist, if you're interested in teaching, broaden your mind. It doesn't have to be for a school, right? Or it doesn't even have to be a full-time type of teaching arrangement. And I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later in my own work, where I was a visiting artist and have my own business where I've consulted with many, many institutions. And this way I had flexibility. I had my own enterprise. Does anybody want to add anything so far? Anybody want to share your own experience with teaching or anything else we've mentioned? Now, sometimes this can be tricky to have balance because teaching takes a lot of energy, and maybe we can brainstorm ideas for setting boundaries so the teaching doesn't take over and wind up undermining one's artistic output. So Salvador Dali is an example of an artist who was unabashedly, he was not afraid to say that he wants to earn money from his art. He says, liking money like I like it is nothing less than mysticism. Money is glory. So sometimes there's this idea with fine art that it's lofty, it's elevated. And if you're concerned about selling your art, it might somehow undermine your purity. So I'm not saying how you should feel about this for your own art. I'm just giving you examples of how different artists think about money and art. So Salvador Dali comes to this country. He was a master of promotion, and he used to do stunts to get attention. And one of the stunts he did was he also designed windows for stores. And when they rearranged his window display, he was so enraged that he hurled a bathtub through the plate glass window and crashed inside the store. Okay, so this, of course, got him a lot of press, and this is one of many examples. Of course, he's known for his iconic painting, The Persistence of Memory, and his surrealist sculptures, but he also did applied art. He made furniture, he made jewelry. So many of these artists, in addition to creating paintings or fine art, they really, you're going to see today, they really expanded how their creative output could be applied. Marc Chagall, of course, is a painter, and he is amazing in how he blended his own sense of purpose and spirituality with his art. So he was often commissioned to design stained glass windows, as is the image on the left. He did a lot of imagery from the Bible. He created a lot of imagery from the Bible, both in paintings and also with commissions like this one. He was commissioned to create a Bible. And it is known as one of the major great works of art. So you might want to make a book, right? You might want to make stained glasses. You don't have to necessarily know how to do stained glass. You might want to design it. And how do you get commissions? Sometimes you can get them through grants, right? Sometimes you can get them privately, right? But the idea is to sort of think about what it is you want to do and then find how to contact the people who would be interested. Marc Chagall also made murals, as did many of the other artists I'm going to show you. And these are two famous ones at the Metropolitan Opera. For years, I did murals in schools. It was a lot of fun, and I'll tell you about that later. Of course, having collectors is really important, and maybe being represented by a commercial gallery or having an art rep who can sell your work and get it in the hands of collectors. And this is Gertrude Stein, who purchased many of the works of Matisse and other modern artists. But Matisse is also an artist who, he had a very broad range of his repertoire. It went way beyond just fine art painting. So Matisse says, wait, my screen is, who can read that quote? Who wants to unmute and read the quote at the top? Something is blocking the screen here. Laz, can you read that?
Sure. What I dream of is an art of balance, of purity and serenity, devoid of troubling or depressing subject matter, an art which could be for every mental worker, for the businessman, as well as the man of letters. For example, a soothing, calming influence on the mind, something like a good armchair, which provides relaxation from physical fatigue. Henri Matisse.
Thank you. So some people criticize Matisse for this statement. Like, wait, what? Art should be a good armchair which provides relaxation? Really? This is the complete opposite idea of someone like Picasso, who painted Guernica, about the bombing in Basque, right? But if you are so inclined to make, in quotes, decorative art, don't think of it as a lesser form, because it's not. Aesthetic beauty is something that's really important to human beings. So this is an example of Matisse's monumental cutouts, but he also applied the cutout technique to various materials. So this is a sketch or a maquette for a ceramic piece. And of course, Matisse also created commissions. So the top piece is his famous Dance 2, which was made at the request of a Russian businessman and art collector. And of course, it's one of the great masterpieces of the world. He was also commissioned to do the dance for the Barnes collection as well. And at the end of his life, he designed almost every aspect of Vence Chapel in France. And interestingly, Matisse was an atheist. And his nurse was a liaison between him and the Dominican Church. And he designed this chapel, the stained glass, the Stations of the Cross, the priest's robe. Here's an example of one of the Stations of the Cross. And ultimately, he said that this was his crowning achievement. So, and there he is from bed drawing the Stations of the Cross. So to me, this is inspiring in two ways. One is he's an older man and his movement is very limited. And he finds new tools and techniques to create his art. Two is he branches out to design all sorts of things that he had never designed before. And also, it reminds me to keep an open mind of what sorts of projects might be suitable for me, right? Here he was an atheist designing a Catholic church or whatever, Dominican church. So Alexander Calder says, above all, art should be fun. And sometimes playful art can go a long way. So Calder starts out as an engineer and he makes toys. He designs toys, which are on the left. And then eventually he turns to fine art using his engineering skills. And he has a very wide range. So he makes these small little wire sculptures. He creates the first mobiles. This one down below is a staybile. It moves, but the base is stable. And then he goes on to do all sorts of commissions large, huge scale sculptures in public, mobiles that are huge. Some of them are huge, some of them are small, jewelry, utensils, all sorts of applied art, paintings, hook rugs, even paints the outside of a plane, designs it. So he's just a great example of a range of creativity and how it can be applied to making money. So, of course, if you're so inclined, you can get public commissions. It doesn't only have to be sculpture, it could be for the MTA, it could be a mural, it could be paintings, it could be art for an airport. And if you don't know where to go, you could start with your state or your locality and go on their websites. So we have the New York Foundation for the Arts. They give listings of all different kinds of grants for specific projects or for specific types of people as well. Now for Jackson Pollock and Lee. Jackson says the secret of success is to be fully awake to everything about you. And Pollock was a genius at synthesizing all the art of his time and what came before. So we see his iconic drip painting, but there was so many movements of art that led up to that type of groundbreaking abstract expressionist art. He was studying Pollock and Siqueiros and indigenous people's art and Mexican art and Spanish art, and surrealism. That's a whole other talk. But Lee was the one who supervised his career. Now, Lee was an amazing artist, of course, in her own right. But when they got married, they decided as a couple that Pollock would be the breadwinner and she would organize his career and promote him. So you might not have a spouse who wants to promote your art. If you do, lucky you. But I think that this points to the idea that if you're not good at something, try to get somebody else who is. So Pollock was not really good at negotiating in business. Lee was very good at it. She was excellent. So Lee, we'll go back, negotiates for Pollock a deal with Peggy Guggenheim, the art patron, to get him a monthly stipend so he could paint in the barn. Peggy Guggenheim represents Pollock's art in Art of This Century, and Lee also negotiates a down payment so that they could buy the house in the Springs. After Pollock dies, a museum approaches Lee to purchase Pollock's painting. She turns it down. She says that's not enough money. And she gets them to, I think, triple the amount, which catapulted all the prices of the abstract expressionists, raised them really, really high. So if you're not a good negotiator, right? If you don't know how to approach people, ask for help. You might not have someone full-time on board with you, but there's many resources that are available. And a lot of them are free also. And we can discuss that more later. Now, Pollock and Krasner were both employed by the WPA, which was the Work Progress Administration, hired artists full-time to create art. And Lee said there was no sexism, men and women were paid the same amount. And she was very, very grateful that she had this opportunity because it was a living wage. Lee's sketch is on the left. Pollock's mosaic piece is on the right. Neither Pollock nor Lee ever realized their own mural being installed into a building during this time. They both mainly assisted. So here's Peggy Guggenheim with Pollock. Peggy commissions Pollock to make a mural for her hallway. And this is a pivoting point in Pollock's career. So here's his famous mural. His art becomes much more abstract. It becomes much more painterly. It becomes much more gestural. And it started with a commission. There's a story, by the way, with this mural that, in the movie it shows he waited till the last minute and then he had a breakthrough. But that's a myth, by the way. That's not true. So here's Lee and Pollock is doing his iconic drip painting technique. as I said, he rises to fame within his own lifetime. Is he the greatest living painter in the United States? Now, there's a whole myth about Jackson Pollock that he's an alcoholic and they're struggling, they're poor, all this type of stuff. But the truth is, he was an alcoholic and he knew it from a very young age. He sought medical treatment. He was even medicated and hospitalized at different points in his life. He was sober for 2 years when he made his great drip paintings. That's when he rose to fame. And they were doing very well financially. The highest selling painting that Pollock sold was $8,000 during his lifetime, which was a lot of money before 1956. And they were actually above the median average income in the United States. Now, naturally, when they first started out and they bought the farmhouse, it was an old farmhouse. It had no plumbing. There were times when, they didn't have at the beginning central heat. It was very cold. They had to go to the outhouse. All those things are true. But I don't really think that has to do with being an artist. I think it has to do with equally being a young couple. And many young couples start out with humble beginnings or buy an old rundown house and fix it up, right? My own parents, I don't know if it was true. They said they didn't have enough cribs, so they put us in drawers on the floor when we were infants. I don't know if that was just made up, but anyway, and then they did well. So later on, Pollock is represented by Betty Parsons. So if you can get gallery representation, that's great, but not all galleries and representation is created equal. So if you get a gallery or a rep and you're happy and they're selling your work, that's great. But there is such a thing as a rep who can rep your work, but not actually get it out there and put the effort into it and have the context that's required to sell work. So if your work is being held up by a rep who's not actually helping you, at some point you might want to question, do I need to get another rep? So Lee, of course, in her own time, she was faced with sexism, always being called Mrs. Pollock. These artists, these female artists during that generation, at the beginning, it was more equal. They were meeting up with the men. They were in New York City. They were in East Hampton. They were exchanging creative and intellectual ideas, organizing themselves as artists with a great deal of respect. When the Surrealists came over from Europe, they brought along with them sexist ideas, where it was like, okay, let's have an intellectual conversation with the men and then have the women join us later. So that shifted things. And also, when the money and the galleries grew in stature, the women were left out. But Lee says what I considered important was that I was able to work and other things would have to take their turn. So regardless, she always continued to paint. When Pollock was alive, she didn't promote herself as an artist, but she always painted. And she said, I would never have it any other way. Pollock respected me as an artist, and she focused on her art. So, someone once asked me, a young person, well, what did you do when you met sexism? I didn't really experience that much sexism directly, but in the cases where I did, I just was a little unstoppable because my drive to be an artist was greater than anything else. So I was unstoppable, meaning mentally. There was nothing that was going to stop me from being an artist. So Lee created the Pollock Krasner Foundation. And when we're talking about money, I think it's important to talk about a give back. When we reach a certain level of success, one might consider giving back. So because Lee had the opportunity studying at Cooper Union on a scholarship, being part of the WPA, a government-sponsored program, she took the entire estate of Jackson Pollock and created a foundation. This is separate from the Pollock House. If you're a professional artist out there, you might want to go to pkf.org and apply for a grant. They give, I believe it's $10,000, and it doesn't have to be for a specific project. It could just be to help you with your living expenses. pkf.org. Okay? Willem de Kooning and Elaine. He says the trouble with being poor is it takes up all your time. And they were, when they were living together as a couple in New York City, they were poor. The story goes, you know, they had a loft in New York City, and the story goes that they used to go to the automat and get ketchup and put hot water and call it soup. So how did they survive? Often it was the woman who would work to bring in money so the man could paint. Elaine de Kooning was a writer. She got a job as a writer for the Art News, and she was very good at writing about the bridge between the artist studio, the artist practice, an intimate look at what the artist was thinking about, and therefore was a bridge in understanding these abstract expressionist artists. It was a bridge to the public. And so she's also a big factor in the success of the abstract expressionists. But often artists wear many hats, right? So an artist might also be a musician or also be a writer, as it is in my case. And those are also, or maybe like Helen Harrison, our former director, she studied fine art, and then she became a critic, and then she became the director of the Pollock House, right? So there's a lot of facets of how your creativity can emerge. Keep an open mind. And both of these artists became very successful in their own lifetime. And eventually they separated. They had separate studios in East Hampton. And there is Elaine painting her famous portrait of JFK, which she was commissioned for. And that is now in the National Gallery of Art in Washington, D.C. And her home is a national landmark privately owned by Chris Burns. Now, we're going to take a little turn here. This is Mark Rothko in his East Hampton garage studio. You could see it's like almost the stereotype of the isolated artist. But in fact, none of these artists were isolated. They all had this amazing community in the East Hampton in New York City. And they had a community with not just artists, but critics, Clement Greenberg, art dealers, right? They weren't actually working in isolation. Now, Mark Rothko is commissioned by the Four Seasons in Manhattan to create a mural. And the commission was $35,000, which was a huge amount of money at that time. And he, after ruminating about this, he turns it down. After he created the mural, he was very devout to this idea that anybody, he says, will eat that kind of food for those kind of prices will never look at a painting of mine. He considered his painting so elevated, right, that he didn't want sort of the bourgeois to be looking at them. He felt they should be deserving of being in a temple. So he had a vision for his paintings. And eventually it was realized. And you can go to the Rothko Chapel in Houston, and it's an interfaith sanctuary which was created by Mark Rothko in 1971. Sadly, Mark Rothko committed suicide a year later. So Christo and his wife, Jean Claude, this is interesting. You know, they do these installations, these outdoor environmental pieces, wrapping buildings and the gates in Manhattan. And you'd think, where do they get the money for this? And one would think maybe the city paid for it because it brought in so much tourism. But they actually raised the $21 million by selling sketches and different things related to it. They didn't actually want to be beholden to any particular patron. And so if you do art that's not immediately saleable, like performance art, for example, you might want to, you could get grants, but you also might want to think about, are there items you could sell related to the performance, right? Like a costume or a sketch or something else. Now, Andy Warhol is probably the complete opposite of Rothko. He's not going within. He is, first off, making pop art based on popular culture. And he's not alone in a studio like Pollock and Rothko and de Kooning. He creates the factory and often designs the pieces, but then other people actually carry them out with silk screen and printmaking. And of course, he has many different types of art, films, performance, and so on. But Andy Warhol says being good in business is the most fascinating kind of art. Making money in art is art, and working is art, and good business is the best art. So he had no shame of making money from art, and he sure did become very, very successful. He started out as a commercial illustrator, and I'm not showing the range of his work, but eventually with these portraits of famous, iconic people, these were commissions, and he sold really, really well with these portraits. This is a portrait he did of the artist Jean-Michel Basquiat, and this was auctioned at Christie's for 20 million plus. And you know, Andy Warhol started out in Pittsburgh from a very, very like low income working class family. He's an example of the American dream. And here's Basquiat, who also rose to fame at a very young age. He says, since I was 17, I thought I might be a star. I think about all my heroes. I had a romantic feeling about how these people became famous. And I like this quote because it shows thought decides future. He was even thinking at 17 he would be a star. And he did become a star. And sadly, he died of a drug overdose. Keith Haring, I love, and we only have a few more. Keith Haring, I love because it's art for everybody. And if you were around in the 1980s in Manhattan, I'm sure you recall seeing his subway drawings. So how does an artist make money if they're doing graffiti, which also, by the way, is illegal? And what Keith Haring did is he created his pop shop and he commercialized his art. And he says, if commercialization is putting my art on a shirt so that a kid who can't afford a $30,000 painting can buy one, then I'm all for it. So Keith Haring did murals, he did T-shirts, he did all sorts of items where his art could be printed and sold at a reasonable price. Sometimes you might be an artist, a fine artist like Faith Reingold, but you might also want to illustrate a book or write a children's book, right? Which is what Faith Reingold did, and she became very famous for this children's book, Tar Beach, about her memories as a child in New York City. Yayoi Kusama, the Japanese artist, her story is amazing. You know, she was abused as a child, and at a certain point, she had a psychotic break and she saw dots. And so all of her artwork, most of it involves dots. And it takes many, many forms. This one is a mirrored room. And she does murals, she does sculptures, she does performance art, every medium you can think of. But the thing is with Yayoi Kusama, she came to this country as a Japanese woman in the 1950s, didn't even know the language. She also had a mental illness, and people shunned
Joyce,
her. Yeah.
Joyce, your video is off. You're not sharing your screen for a moment, just to let you know.
Is that for everybody? Because mine shows I am sharing it.
I can see it.
Yes, it's being shown, Joyce.
Okay, here's what you do. If that happened to you, sign out and sign back in. It's a glitch on your end.
I can see it.
Yeah, that happened to me the other day. Just sign out and sign back in. Okay? Because most people could see it, which means that it's your computer or device. So, okay, so Yui Kusama, she's met with sexism, she's met with racism, right? And not every time, but 3 times, she made a piece of art, and then a male artist would do the same sort of thing and get very, very famous for it. Okay? So if you want to learn more about it, I have a little YouTube video about it. And she wound up having a nervous breakdown and kind of became a little reclusive. But eventually she comes back out. And in the 1980s and 90s, her art is picked up. She has a one-person show at MoMA. And she rises to such acclaim that at one point she is the highest selling female artist in the world. And she was still alive. So don't give up. Don't give up. This is the mural in Grand Central Station. It's amazing, the mosaic tile. And then she also says, I don't think of fashion and art as separate. She collaborates with Louis Vuitton, and in their stores, they had all sorts of installations and handbags and other items that were designed by, or, not designed fully, but had the Yayoi Kusama dots on them. And Alma Thomas, I think she's our last artist. She is a great example. Never say you're too old or it's too late. Alma Thomas is a Black American painter working in Washington, D.C. She is a school teacher. She doesn't start painting full time until she's like around 68, 67 years old. And she becomes so successful. She is the first Black female artist to have a one-person show at the Whitney Museum of American Art while she's still alive. She's 81 years old. And two of her paintings were bought by the Obamas. And that painting I showed you, Resurrection, was hanging in the White House. And it's so beautiful because she started off painting images that were more directly about social justice and then turned to abstraction and color and nature. But this painting, Resurrection, I think it implies social justice in the White House. So I'm going to give a little overview of my own career, and I'm not showing everything. I've been in the arts my entire life. And let's say I've been 45 years as an adult, right, in the arts, earning money as an artist. So I'm going to start off with this. Art can transform great pain into creative prosperity. So when I was at School of Visual Arts studying illustration in college, my brother died, and my father had a horrible accident that left him completely disabled and in pain. And obviously this was extremely painful. And as an illustration major, all I did was just draw pictures about this. And it was a way for me to release it. So when I was about to graduate, a rep came in to look at our work. And he goes, oh, you should get a job as a waitress because no one is going to hire you as an illustrator. This is way too personal. I wasn't happy about that, but I didn't listen. So I made a portfolio, but I tweaked it a little bit. I put some things in there, a little more commercial, but with my style. And then the first place I went to as a freelance illustrator, they hired me. And for years, I did editorial illustrations about subject matter that had like a very psychological theme to it. So don't listen to people if they're discouraging. And then for years, I did a lot of different sort of art about fragility and about I used mixed media. It was about vulnerability, about grieving, things like this. It was not very saleable. I mean, the one on the left is made out of glycerin soap, so that's not that saleable. It's very fragile. But I wound up doing workshops about loss and bereavement in art. And I felt I was very poised to do this because of my own experience. And today I offer these workshops working with the Pollock House. We have a grant for it, and I visit all sorts of hospice groups to do these workshops about bereavement and art. And I get paid for it. So I started working in museums as a young adult, and I loved it. And not only did I love the public and, of course, the museums, but it also took me out of myself. Because when you're helping somebody else, you're not thinking about your own loss. And so I developed a career in museum education. And part of it was writing for museums, writing guides and things, and marketing materials, and also running the budget and learning about education. And all these skills that I learned at the Museum of Modern Art. Also, I taught at Victor D'Amico House in East Hampton. But eventually, this led for me leaving the museum, the nonprofit world behind, where it's kind of hard to sustain yourself as a museum educator because it doesn't pay that well compared to what prices are in New York. So I started my own consulting business. Imagine that. And I wrote my own books, and I got them published eventually by Random House and Watson Guptill. And I started my own company. And eventually this grew where I had teachers, and we did all sorts of programs, library, school, internships, all different kinds of facets, adults, children, but all with the same methodology, which I'll share with you. I also did Unity murals, which was a lot of fun, a lot of work, but it really is in line with my core value about unity and diversity. And it beautifies the school. And of course, the book sold, but my main income came from the author visits. And the approach in the book is to ask questions, open-ended questions. And this particular book helps people express their feelings. It's geared to children. And again, this was a core value of mine because I knew that the ability to make art when I lost my brother, the ability to express my feelings, I feel it really saved me from having a breakdown. And, you know, following up with hands-on projects and, you know, Jackson Pollock, different styles of modern art, and with workshops that are related. So eventually I started consulting with the Pollock Krasner House and Study Center. And all of these programs I had developed for my own business, I also brought those to the Pollock House as well. And today we have a thriving program, which also includes Zoom programs like the one we're doing right now. Oh, it's always evolving. And eventually, as I became happier, my paintings became more cheerful. And I started doing whimsical paintings like this with bright colors and words and graphic design. And recently, I just changed where I think because so often we're reading icons, I started to make paintings that use icons and letters of the alphabet, but in a way where it is taking something that's not ambiguous, like a Google map symbol, and making it ambiguous and mysterious. But as of 2024, I responded to our current, let's say, political situation and the election, and I started making social justice posters, and I sell these, and 50% of the net profit I donate to a nonprofit. This gives me great joy. They're affordable. And at the same time, it gives me a lot of joy when I raise money for causes I believe in, such as Planned Parenthood. So and I still endeavor to sell my own fine art paintings, which I do occasionally. And that's a little bit of my path. So I think for myself, earning living as an artist, it's been a combination of teaching, education, creating art. But what I realize is sometimes I used to think they're like not together, they kind of like oppose each other. But I realize it's not true because, and then I'll stop talking about myself. My core belief, my most important value in life is in unity and diversity. I love diverse thinking. I love creativity. And if I could do that through a book, through a painting, through a social justice poster, through a mural, I'm good. Okay? Or through a Zoom talk. So it finds expression in different ways. And I want to hear from you. Maybe you'll add something to this. Ways to earn money from art, fine art, galleries, well, not just fine art, commissions, grants, residencies, licensing, and prints. Anybody want to add to that list?
I want to add something, and that is through social media, as far as direct selling, whether it's through Etsy or Pinterest, or even though I know that it's difficult, or it's really a whole different thing, but there's so much more available to us online, and it's still earning money from art.
100%. In fact, I think I have that right here.
Okay.
100%.
Right.
Yeah. So let's start at the top when we talk about, and we'll work our way to that.
Mhm.
And thank you for adding that. So art galleries, there's different types of art galleries. There's the commercial art gallery, right? There's the artist-run gallery is a co-op where each artist contributes financially to the gallery. There's a monthly fee. And sometimes there's also responsibilities that come along with that. And in exchange, the artist will have a one-person show and be able to sell their work through the gallery, right? Now there's the vanity gallery. That's different than the artist-run gallery. A vanity gallery is a gallery you pay to get into, but they might invite you, but then you might pay $5,000 to be part of that gallery. And then you might have a show or be part of a group show and they'll get a percentage, you'll get a percentage. Vanity galleries are usually frowned upon because if somebody has your $5,000, they're not going to be as motivated to sell your art. So sometimes it could be like, oh, yay, I have a gallery, but are you really selling your art through that gallery? And also, sometimes they don't have the same level of prestige because the fact that you paid to get in there. And then, of course, there's nonprofit exhibition spaces. It could be a community center. It could be a library. I guess I repeated that down there. But these things can be, you can sell art at these spaces. So, or it could be a nonprofit actual gallery as well, like the Equity Gallery in New York City. Or we have a community center in the Hamptons, Oswald Hall. And I remember a friend of mine, oh, I'm not putting my art in there. That's too lowbrow. And she put the painting in there and it sold for a good deal of money, right? Then, of course, there's places you could place your art. Could be a restaurant, a real estate office. Sometimes it could be they're showcasing a house in the Hamptons, for example, and they need art, but they're also selling the art. Now, you have to be careful with this, that they're not just using your art and not paying you a rental fee and you're not getting anything out of it. Community centers, like somebody else said, online sites. Be careful with online sites. Read the fine print. Make sure you're not giving away all your rights, okay? We're going to have Carol Steinberg, our intellectual property lawyer, who might be able to answer some questions at our next session. Social media, yes, you could sell it right off social media. And of course, you can also initiate your own studio visits with clients through word of mouth, right? Or have an open studio. So marketing, how do you get to the people you want to sell to. Could be through a website, but websites are sort of old-fashioned now. So usually artists use social media, and particularly Instagram, Blue Sky, I didn't put it up there, YouTube, TikTok. Sometimes it can be helpful. You can make a really short reel talking about a painting, and that will get more views than just a post of an image. Networking, going to art events, networking even on Zoom, right? But going to art openings and different places where you're going to meet people in the arts, parties. Word of mouth. You see someone, you never know, you can put yourself out there and say, this just happened to me actually. I was at a yoga retreat. I said, my vision for the year is to sell my paintings. So the man sitting next to me said, well, like what? And I said, oh, look at my website. And he goes, oh, I'll buy that one. And he bought it on the spot. Okay, so just don't be afraid to say what you desire, because you're doing something good for someone. You're making something they're going to appreciate. You know, cards, business cards, postcards, flyers, that could be helpful. Not as important anymore because you can just scan someone's Instagram. Advertising can be helpful. It's expensive. It might not be the best way to go. You might be better off just doing free ads. And of course, getting an art rep, if that's extremely helpful. Okay, now, when you document your work and photograph it, do a good job. Don't put up a photograph on any of your websites or anything that's a bad photo, because that's the only thing the person is going to see. If you're not good at it, get somebody else to do it. Artist statement. Now, some artists don't know how to write, which is okay, but other people do. So the artist statement generally should say what you're doing and why you're doing it, right? And maybe how you're doing it. And if you want some advice on that, you can go to my YouTube channel. I had someone from the New York Foundation for the Arts give a talk about it, and she was really good. She breaks it all down. Once you write your artist statement, if you're not a good editor, please have somebody else edit it, because it doesn't look good if you have an artist statement and there's misspellings. It just doesn't look professional. And then, of course, your resume and your CV. Some people have different resumes, different curriculum vitae for different areas. So I have one for education. I have one for art. It's two separate things in terms of the resume. Anybody else want to add anything on this? Any other tips for marketing?
Logos and book covers, cover art.
What do you mean? Can you go further with that? I'm not sure.
Sort of like an illustration for a book cover, or if a company or a organization has a call for logos.
Oh, 100%. That's not so much how you're going to market yourself. That's what you're going to market. Yes, you might decide to be a graphic designer or an illustrator. Yes, absolutely, 100%. Illustrate a book cover or a magazine cover. Yeah. Now, how are you going to get to the editor of the magazine to do their cover? That's where marketing comes in. You might want to have it all ready to go, your online portfolio. Does that make sense? You need to find out who is the person who you need to contact. That's where the marketing comes in. Marketing, if you want to do it in reverse, is you actually ask yourself, if someone is looking for what I do, how are they going to find me? Right? How are they going to find me? Is it through a website? Is it through Instagram? So these are just some basic tips. If you're so excited about a gallery or a project or an illustration, never just do a verbal agreement. Get it in writing, even if it's $200, because it's very easy to misunderstand a verbal agreement, okay? That's one thing. Second, if there is a dispute, you have it in writing. And also there's many more things, aspects involved in a contract other than just how much the thing cost. So for example, if you're working with a gallery, are they allowed to offer a client a discount? Who pays for the insurance? Who pays for the frames? Who pays for the delivery? Okay, when can a contract be canceled? All different things like that. You can find a lot of that online or hire a lawyer, right? Read the agreement. Don't just sign something because you're excited about it. Read it, and if you don't understand it, get legal help. There's Lawyers for the Arts offer free legal service if you can't afford it. Get it signed. An agreement means nothing if it's not signed by both parties, okay? So that's where your business skills come in. You want to firm up your business skills. If you're not good at it, don't worry. You will get good at it with practice, and you can always ask other people for help. So as you think you become, create a vision. Then through the vision, you can set smaller goals. Then align your actions with your vision. It doesn't mean go crazy, but if you say, let's say, my vision is to sell these social justice posters, right? My goal is to double the amount I've been selling. So in order for me to align my actions with my vision, I need to find a venue like print on demand so I can sell more. That's a concrete action I can take. If I do nothing, they might just sit in my room. But always expect a positive outcome, right? Especially if you feel this is something good. And what I gotta be honest with you, what I find helpful, this is just my own 2 cents, is when I think it's good, but not just for me. When I think it's good for other people as well, it seems like there's a real energy that gets going, okay? So let's say you're making beautiful landscape paintings, and you just enjoy it. That's good for you. And if you sell a painting, that's good for you. But also focus on how the person is going to feel when they have this beautiful landscape painting in their home, and how you're creating beauty and goodwill. Does that make sense? Because then you'll be a little more open to telling people about it. Maybe you won't be like, oh, that's selfish. It's self-promotion. Okay. So those are just my tips. Obviously, I'm a work in progress and nothing has ever been perfect. But I have to tell you, and then I'll stop talking. When I started off at the Museum of Modern Art and I had to do those budgets for the program I was running, I used to get nauseous physically because I never worked with numbers and I would get like sick. I'd be like, I have to find out like exactly how much it costs to print 1,000 flyers, you know, and I have to price compare my head. And I just kept doing it. And now I have to figure out how to do a book contract. But you know what? I got other people to help me also, but eventually I did become good at it. And then people go, you're good at this. And I was like, no, I'm not good at it. I learned to get good at it. Okay. So this is always, and right now it's a work in progress. I'm like, how am I going to do this print on demand? I don't know about printing. So 2 people sent me emails to help me. So I'm like, well, read the email, start with that. Anyway, what I want to do now is I'm going to turn it to you. I've been talking a lot, so I would like to take quiet, and why don't you write down some goals, right? Or even don't even call it a goal. If you're stuck, write down 20 ways you can make money from your art. Then maybe you could pick one of those that you want to focus on, okay? So let's start with that, and I'm going to come back in 5 minutes, and we'll see what people want to share. Okay, and we'll give each other tips. We'll give each other some help. So thank you, everybody. There you are. There you are. Go ahead, Cece. Nice to hear
Oh,
from you.
okay. Hi, you too. So for me, I realized that I want to do my art on t-shirts because I do a lot of different kinds of art, and it would make sense for me to just start with a t-shirt.
Mhm. And do you see yourself selling the t-shirts, or do you want to just license the image?
So I always want to own my own copyright in everything that I am doing. Um, so I think something like a print on demand would be good. I still do shopping on Amazon, even though I've lessened that somewhat because of what's going on. But print on demand, that appeals to me also.
Oh, yeah, and there's other companies besides Amazon that do print on demand. You can get it directly from a printer, that I know. And
Thank you.
no, that's really good. That's very specific. So now let me ask you something, Cece, and I'm with you on this, right? Because I was thinking myself, what would be, because sometimes it's helpful to just have a baby step. So what would be a small step you could take towards that vision?
Let's see. So one of the things that I'm doing right now is that I'm going through art that I've done and I'm looking at them differently. I'm seeing what is more background, what would color wise, what would look good on a t-shirt. And I do that in terms of what I prefer when I'm buying t-shirts and what I want to see. So that's what I'm doing right now. That's that step, and I can connect that to what would look good on a t-shirt.
It
That
sounds like fun. It sounds like fun. And then I would think eventually you'll like print out a sample so you could see what it actually looks like.
yes, yes.
That sounds really fun. Good luck with that. And here's a tip
Thank
for
you.
everybody. And I didn't make up any of this stuff. Other people told me this stuff. Instead of saying I want to, you intend to, right? It's more powerful. I intend to sell t-shirts. Because if you say I want to, well, you might continue to want to. That could go on a long time. But intention is a little more powerful. It's a little more concrete. But that sounds like a lot of fun. So I can't wait to see them, okay? Circle back with that at one of our future workshops, Cece.
Okay, I will.
Anybody else?
Hi, this is Han. One artist that I think really did a good job is Bobbi Brown. Um, Although she's in the cosmetic industry, but I think her model is really worked in a way that she herself write a book doing tutorials, what is art teacher does. And she has product. The first brand was successful, which is her name, Bobbi Brown, then sold to whatever company. Now it's not hers. Then she opened another brand, which is kind of all nature ingredients, and I got stuck with that. So I studied her strategy, which terms to myself is I intended to, thank you for the term, open an Amazon store that art practice becomes a life of why, and the product is a book of why, tutorial of how, and product of merchandise. So that's what I was thinking all today's lessons. So
That's brilliant, Han.
what I have done for testing is silk scarf from my artwork that is printed onto piece of silk that I did print 10 pieces, which I gave it to my recommender who write me recommendation letters. And stickers of non-permanent tattoo, which is kind of designed from my printmaking works. That has some sales, and I'm not sure about the pricing. That's the problem.
So Han, those are two separate ideas, right? One is the educational art product, and the other one is more like spin-offs from your art, like a silk scarf? Or am I
Yeah.
misunderstanding? Those are two separate things, right?
Those are all merchandise.
Yeah, okay, but one is educational and one is like merchandise. I could buy you scarf. Well, I think in terms of pricing, there's always first see what the market bears. Like how much do other people sell scarves for? And
Mhm.
and how is yours better or how is it not as good? Like, oh, well, this scarf is selling for $300, but that's a really famous designer. I'm not as famous for them, so I'll lower it a little bit. So there's that thing, like comparing yourself to what the market bears. And then, of course, working the numbers of how much is it really costing you? Okay. So there's the direct cost, the dye, the fabric, the box. Those are direct costs. Direct costs are things that will go up or down depending on quantity, right? The indirect costs are things like, do you have to pay overhead, right? Did you have to pay for advertising? Did you have to pay for, other things in marketing that are more general? And then if you really want to run the numbers, you would take how much of a percentage of your indirect cost is going to that product. But let's just start simple. Get clear on how much is it costing you to make these scarves and how much time also. If you're doing it, then you want to charge for your time a little bit as well, right?
Yeah.
But I think that sounds great. And also, the idea of having like these art educational products, people have been hugely financially successful with that. Huge, like multi-million dollar industries. Huge. And it could go, you could have your YouTube video and then you have your product and you have, your book and you have it all like a package. That can be very, very big. And I love your idea. By the way, everybody, Han was one of the exhibiting artists at the Pollock House. She had a one-person show through the museum over the summer. She's an amazing artist, fine artist. And I did notice you were selling a dress in the gift store, right?
Yes, that dress is a collaboration with a fashion designer.
Yeah, so that was really nice.
That
Yeah.
was that was a fun collaboration.
Mhm. Yeah. No, I think your work would lend itself to scarves and different kind of clothing items. And by the way, everybody, I am the proud recipient. I bought one of Hans' paintings. Guess
Yes,
what I
I'm gonna
learned
do it now.
from buying a painting? I was like, it's not practical. I need other things more, but I fell in love with her painting. And the joy it gives me is so much bigger than any practical thing. And it's all a flow, it's like you buy a painting and then somebody buys a painting from you. So keep your eye out for Hans' work and also keep your eye out for buying people's art as well. It creates a flow. So you're amazing.
Thank you. I recently collect artist book as well, and I happen to know recently that book has been in UK what is that British Library in London, so it was
Wow.
an early invest.
That's true. It's also an investment. That's good.
Right.
So yours is an investment for my retirement, hon.
Oh,
So
I will be proud of that. Thank
okay,
you.
no, I'm never selling that painting. I'm kidding. Okay, who else would like to share? Anybody else? These are all really good ideas.
Actually, I have a question for Han, what she just talked about collaboration, because that can be a good idea. How did your collaboration came about? Did you reach out? Did the person reach out?
Well, for a scarf that I have been working on several years, first I approached companies, then they charge me high kind of quantity of money. And if I work with other fashion designer, and which is my percentage of integrity is low. So it didn't work it out for many years. until one time I have personal show. And one friend's friend is a designer and it just happened to be clicked. So it doesn't happen like I intended to dig up, and it happened naturally. The ones that I digged out didn't work it out. So that's her brand need a artsy kind of outreach. And I wanted to visualize in something that is not just hang on a wall. So that's landed up with my image on a dress and sold in Macy. So two pieces was in Pollock House and one was sold. So
Very
now it's still on Macy, yeah, on discount hugely.
Oh, don't worry about that. Someone once they found my book in a garage sale. I was like, oh, okay. Anyway, no, that's great. And this goes into the realm of licensing. I had a friend who did abstract paintings and she licensed her designs to West Elm. So you might, everybody, I would suggest come back for next week when we will hear from Carol Stein, who's an intellectual property lawyer. She's not going to be able to cover everything, but she might also be able to give you some good resources of how to get information. Okay? So on April 2nd at 6 o'clock, and hopefully we'll have it at the house as well as on Zoom. And you can go to pkhouse.org, go to the calendar and sign up to come in person. The link I think that's on there for the Zoom right now is wrong. So if you have a problem with the Zoom link, you can email me or I'll just send out the new one to everybody. Okay? But mark your calendar for that. So who else would like to share? Martin, did you want to share something?
Well, I have been writing several things, but goals or whatever. But then it's true what you said. I mean, before doing art school, I was let's say teaching with a teacher, and then I published things in newspaper. Not I did publish; they published my work. Then did maybe city covers. But when I did art school, it's like I turned into teaching and left like my artist part, let's say. So even I planned to make many things after art school, but then I went into some postgraduates or whatever. Then it's like nowadays it's like I'm more focused into Zoom classes in English,
Sure.
even though English is not my first language, but I am all the time trying to improve and learning. And then I'm entering many Zoom classes just to improve my English, let's say. But then I don't know. But then there are too many goals, and it's difficult to make too many things.
True, true. If
Mhm.
you have too many, it's too much because I do that sometimes. I get like mentally overwhelmed.
Mhm.
So it's good to sort of, if you can, to prioritize. Also, I think when it comes to goals with business and art, like there's the goal that could be relatively easy to achieve. So let's say like selling social justice posters at a reasonable price. Those are small jobs, they're easy to sell. But
Mhm.
selling an entire painting would be better because it would be like, wow, you get a chunk of money all at once instead of a lot of little transactions, but it's a harder thing to sell. So
Mhm.
sometimes in a business, you have small things and big things. Does that
Mhm.
make sense?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you're doing great, Martin. Martin's a
Yes,
great,
actually,
great
I try
artist,
to
great teacher.
do short
Hmm?
steps rather than big ones, and in the middle I might fall in the in the pit. Usually, I try to make, I mean, short steps instead of trying to make a big one and then falling in the middle. Okay, so I rather, if something comes up that maybe is bigger, it's better. But if not, it's just doing, but that is time consuming and I don't know.
Yeah, we don't want to make ourselves crazy with anything. Well, this also. No, I
Mhm.
mean, it's all about balance. It's like I want to be happy in the moment while I'm also reaching for a goal, but I don't
Yes.
want to be unhappy if I haven't met my goal yet,
Mhm.
right?
Oh, yes, I try to enjoy what I do. Okay,
I
and
think
when I,
you're doing great, Martin. No, you're probably just based on you becoming you're probably an amazing teacher, you're an amazing artist, and you're learning English, and my Spanish is still terrible. So anyway,
I don't
so
think
let's
so.
see. No, it's bad. It's bad. Really good. And as we go along, we'll be able to see our progress. Okay? There's always going to be setbacks, there's always going to be challenges, but in the long term, it's progress, believe me. And I hope we could do the next one also in person, because it's fun when we can network a little bit in person too. And so thank you for coming, everyone. And I hope to see you at the Pollock House. Go to pkhouse.org to find out about our upcoming exhibits, our opening season, and I hope to see you there over the summer or on Zoom. So,
Thank
bye,
you.
everybody.
Thank
Bye.
you.